Knows-Millionaire stopped cold in a dusty diner. Not by the food, but by the waitress humming a lullaby. His heart froze. It was the very song his late mother once sang to him. But how could this stranger know it? And what hidden truth was about to unravel his entire past? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. Adrian Cole had built an empire out of glass towers, silk contracts, and polished marble lobbies. At only 35, he was the owner of one of the largest hotel chains on the East Coast, his name whispered with admiration in business circles and with envy in others. He was, to most of the world, untouchable. Yet behind his sharp gray eyes and tailored suits lived a man carved hollow by time. His mother's death, when he was just 8, had left a scar too deep to heal, a silence that even money could not fill. The only thing he had ever carried of her was a faint memory, the way her voice trembled like warm rain when she sang him to sleep. He remembered no lyrics, only a melody that had followed him into manhood like a ghost. On this evening, after an endless boardroom battle over numbers and mergers, Adrian found himself restless. The city's neon lights felt suffocating, the polished perfection of his world a cage. Instead of returning to his penthouse, he told his driver to keep going, past the skyscrapers, past the suburbs, until the highway stretched empty against the dusk. An hour later, they reached a sleepy little town with a single glowing diner sign blinking against the twilight. Adrian dismissed his driver, telling him he needed solitude. He pushed open the glass door of the diner, and a small bell chimed. The place smelled of coffee grounds and fried bacon. Red leather booths lined the windows, worn but comforting, a stark contrast to the sterile marble and glass he was used to. He slid into a corner booth, loosening his tie, trying for once to breathe without the weight of wealth pressing on him. Waitress approached, carrying a coffee pot. She looked young, no older than her early 20s, with chestnut hair pulled into a messy ponytail. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes, the kind that spoke of long shifts and unspoken burdens, but she moved with quiet grace. "Coffee?" she asked softly. "Yes," Adrian replied curtly, his voice rough from disuse. She poured without question and offered a small smile before moving to another table. Adrian wrapped his hands around the mug, savoring the warmth, when something unexpected pierced the silence. A melody. Soft, low, almost unconscious, the waitress had begun to hum as she cleared plates from a booth nearby. Adrian's chest tightened, his pulse stomached. That tune impossible, unmistakable. The lullaby his mother had sung to him, the only piece of her that remained lodged in the shadows of his childhood. He froze, his coffee untouched, eyes fixed on her as though the force of his stare alone could demand answers. His mind whirled. How could she know? That melody had never been recorded, never written, never shared beyond a mother and her small boy in the quiet of a modest bedroom decades ago. The waitress, Clara, her name stitched on the badge at her apron, continued humming absent-mindedly, unaware that she was unraveling the millionaire's carefully built composure. Adrian's throat went dry, his palms cold despite the mug's warmth. The clinking of plates, the hum of the diner, faded into nothing. There was only her voice and the memory it carried. Suddenly, Clara glanced up and met his gaze. Embarrassment washed across her face as if she had been caught trespassing into a sacred space. She stopped humming instantly, cheeks coloring, and stammered, "I'm sorry. I didn't realize." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and busied herself wiping down the table, trying to vanish into motion. Adrian wanted to speak, to ask, to demand, but the words caught somewhere between disbelief and fear. Instead, he tossed a bill onto the table, rose sharply, and left without explanation. The bell over the diner door chimed behind him, but the sound of her humming had already lodged itself in his mind like a haunting refrain. That night, back in his sterile penthouse overlooking the city, Adrian Cole could not sleep. He lay in darkness, the skyline glittering beyond his window, but his mind was far away, in a small diner, in the fragile hum of a young woman's lullaby. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years saw his mother's face in his memories more clearly. and he asked himself the question that would not let him rest. How did she know that song? The next morning, Adrian woke with the same tune echoing in his head. He had spent years burying his childhood beneath deals, contracts, and money. Yet one stranger's hum had shattered his walls in a single moment. He dressed mechanically, sliding into another tailored suit, but the melody followed him into the day like a shadow he could not shake. He canceled his scheduled meeting. His assistant protested, but Adrian's voice was steel. Reschedule everything. Today, I have other matters. By noon, his car was heading back toward the little town. Each mile closer tightened the coil in his chest. He felt foolish, irrational. He was chasing a ghost in a song, yet something deeper, almost primal, urged him on. The diner looked smaller in daylight, its chipped paint more obvious, but it pulsed with life. Locals crowded the booths, children laughing over pancakes, farmers drinking coffee after long mornings. Adrian entered quietly, his presence drawing curious glances. His suit didn't belong here, nor did the sharp set of his jaw, but he ignored them. Clara was behind the counter, bouncing plates with practiced ease. She looked different in daylight, still tired, but her face was gentler, softer. She didn't notice him at first, but when she did, surprise flickered in her eyes. She hesitated for only a second before offering the same small smile as yesterday, though it carried a trace of nervousness now. "Coffee?" she asked again, her voice measured, cautious. Adrian nodded, sliding into the same booth, his hands clenched on the table as though steadying himself against an unseen storm. Clara poured his cup, her movements quiet, efficient. Then she turned to leave. "Wait," Adrian said abruptly. His voice was sharper than he intended, and she flinched slightly. He exhaled, softened. "That song you were humming yesterday? Where did you learn it?" Her brow furrowed, confusion mingling with wariness. "Song?" "Lola," Adrian pressed, his voice low. "The one you were humming when you were clearing the tables." Clara's hand stilled on the pot. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again, as though words sat heavy on her tongue. "Oh, that," she murmured, almost to herself. She set the pot down carefully. "Preview eyes," Adrian said, leaning forward, his eyes intense. "Where did you hear it?" Clara hesitated, glancing around the diner as if afraid of being overheard. Finally, she answered softly. I don't really know. My mother used to sing it. She said it was something passed down in our family. It's just always been there, I guess." Adrian's heart thundered, his breath caught in his chest. Her mother? Passed down? The coincidence was too exact, too cruel. He felt the walls of his carefully controlled world tilt. He wanted to ask more, to demand names, dates, proof, but Clara straightened, nerves flashing across her face, and quickly excused herself to another table. He was left staring at the untouched coffee, the faint echo of that lullaby still lingering in his ears. When he left the diner that afternoon, Adrian carried more than unanswered questions. He carried the heavy weight of memory and a new obsession. That night, in his penthouse, he stood by the window as the city lights shimmered like stars. He thought of his mother, of the lullaby, of Clara Hayes. The waitress, with tired eyes, and a song that shouldn't belong to her. And for the first time in years, Adrian Cole, the millionaire who believed he had mastered every part of his world, realized he was standing on the edge of a mystery that could unravel everything he thought he knew about his past. Adrian didn't sleep that night. The city murmured and blinked beyond his windows, but his mind stayed tangled in a song. Not just a song, it was the lullaby, a melody that belonged only to the gentle voice of his mother. And now that voice, or something frighteningly close to it, had slipped from the lips of a diner waitress named Clara Hayes. By morning, he didn't even try to pretend he could function like normal. He canceled his morning meetings again, which caused his assistant to call twice and text 3 times, to no avail. Adrian didn't answer. He didn't care. All he knew was that he had to see her again. He needed to hear that melody, to know it hadn't just been a dream from a desperate, sleep-deprived mind. He arrived at the diner just before the lunch rush, the same booth waiting in the corner like it had been holding space for him. Clara was there, just like the day before, tying her apron and balancing a tray in one hand, her chestnut hair now clipped up neatly. Her movements were quiet and graceful, like someone used to going unnoticed. She saw him the moment he stepped in, her face flickering with something unreadable. But she nodded, walked toward him with that same practiced ease, and placed the menu in front of him. "Coffee?" she asked again, the corners of her lips twitching as if trying to decide between habit and wariness. "Please," Adrian said, his voice softer than yesterday. "Black?" She poured without question, just like before. Adrian searched her face while she focused on the cup. He wanted to say so much, but even a billionaire like him didn't know how to ask why a stranger's voice could pull the foundation from beneath his world. Clara turned to leave again, but Adrian found his voice. "It's a nice day today. You always work the lunch shift." She paused. "Most days. Double shifts when I can get them." "Must be exhausting," he said gently, trying not to come off as invasive. She shrugged. "You get used to it." He hesitated, then asked, "Do you live nearby?" Her eyebrows lifted slightly, and he quickly added, "I just mean, this place seems small, hard to get by." Clara's posture stiffened just enough to notice. "It is, but my sister's still in school. Someone has to pay the bills." "Sister?" "She's 15, smart as hell, but she's got a mouth on her." Clara cracked the smallest smile, one that faded quickly. "It's just the two of us." Adrian nodded slowly. The fact she was supporting someone else, holding her world together while juggling greasy plates and lukewarm coffee, only made her presence more powerful. A family of two, like him after his mother died, and yet the melodies survived. As the hours passed, Adrian lingered in the corner booth, pretending to read emails while watching her from time to time. She moved between tables, taking orders, refilling drinks, laughing with a toddler who dropped his... And then it happened again. She began to hum. It was almost imperceptible, buried beneath the diner noise, but Adrian's ears latched onto it like a man hearing the call of home after years lost in the wilderness. This time, it wasn't just the familiar tune. She was actually singing, softly, under her breath, as she placed a plate in front of a customer. "Sleep now, my heart, where angels stay. The moon will guard while dreams will play." Adrian's entire body tensed. That line wasn't just familiar, that line was secret. His mother had only sung it when they were completely alone. It wasn't part of any known song. He'd searched before, years ago, Googling lyrics, asking music historians. No record. It had been a lullaby she'd made up, whispered just for him when he was afraid of the dark. And now Clara Hayes, waitress in a roadside diner, was singing it like it was just another tune passed down from one tired generation to another. He waited until she returned to his table. This time, his voice wasn't curious, it was shaken. "Dawn, you sang a line just now, something about angels and the moon?" Clara's face froze, her hand instinctively curled around the coffee pot. "Where did you hear it?" Adrian pressed, his voice low. "Please, tell me." Clara glanced over her shoulder, ensuring no one was watching, then leaned slightly closer. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I already told you, my mom used to sing it, said her mom taught it to her. I didn't know it was anything." "Something," Adrian said, his voice trembling. "It's the last thing my mother ever sang to me." Silence stretched between them like a pulled thread, threatening to snap. Clara's lips parted, but no words came. Adrian could see the confusion in her eyes, but also something else. A flicker of understanding, maybe even fear. Before he could ask more, the bell above the door rang, and a group of noisy teenagers stumbled in. Clara straightened instantly, pulled away from the booth, and walked off without another word, leaving Adrian staring after her, his heart pounding, his world unraveling with each note she sang. He didn't leave the diner that day. He sat for hours, through the lunch crowd, through the lull that followed. Clara kept her distance, only refilling his coffee once with a quiet nod. She didn't hum again. Not a single note. But Adrian was no longer confused. He was consumed. The line she sang couldn't be coincidence, couldn't be passed down through strangers. There had to be a connection. His mother, Alina Hartman, had grown up in foster care after losing her parents early, but she never talked much about her past. All Adrian knew was that she'd once lived in a small town not far from here, and that she'd had no family left. But what if she was wrong? What if she had a sibling she never knew? What if Clara Hayes was more than a stranger? When Clara finally took her break, sitting outside on a concrete step behind the diner, sipping a canned soda, Adrian followed. She looked up as he stepped out. "I don't really like being followed." "I'm sorry," he said quickly. I need to understand. That song isn't just any song. It's a thread to my childhood, a piece of someone I lost." Clara leaned back against the wall, her shoulders tense. "I told you what I know. My mom sang it. She said it was a lullaby her mother used to sing to her." "Do you know your grandmother's name?" Adrian asked. Clara shook her head. "She died before I was born. We didn't talk about her much. My mom said the past was too painful. She only told me stories when she was really tired, or sad, or Adrian sat down on the step beside her. "My mother's name was Alina Hartman. She was adopted when she was 8. She died when I was young. But that song? That was hers. I've never heard it anywhere else. Never found it in any music archive, not in books, nowhere. It belonged to her." Clara turned to him, searching his face. "Are you saying you think we're—" "I don't know," Adrian said, "but there's something here, Clara. Some thread between your family and mine. Maybe you're my cousin, maybe something else, but that lullaby is not a coincidence." Clara bit her lip. "We don't have money for records or DNA tests or whatever rich people do when they want to find answers." "I don't care about money right now," Adrian replied. "I care about truth." Silence fell between them again, not tense this time, but heavy with possibility. Clara looked down at her hands, then back at him. "Ismail used to cry when she sang that song," she said quietly. "Every time, like it hurt." Adrian's throat tightened. "Maybe it did," he whispered. She nodded. "Maybe that's how memories sing." For the first time, Clara didn't look like she wanted to run from him. She looked like someone who also wanted answers but had been too scared to ask the questions. "I don't know what this means," she said honestly, "but I want to know too." Adrian reached into his coat and pulled out his card. "Let's find out together." She took it, staring at his name. "Adrian Cole," she said softly. "Sound expensive." He chuckled. "It's just a name." "No," Clara replied. "It's a beginning." Adrian Cole wasn't used to waiting for answers. In the world of hotels, acquisitions, and boardrooms, money often erased delays, silenced objections, and cut straight through to results. But this was different. No amount of money could untangle the knot that had tightened around his chest since he first heard Clara Hayes humming that lullaby. And yet, money was the only tool he knew how to use to dig deeper. By Monday morning, he was sitting in his penthouse office overlooking the skyline, speaking quietly to a man who had been on his payroll for years. Marcus Lane. Private investigator, discreet, loyal, known for finding information most people thought buried. She demurred. "I don't want noise, no attention," Adrian told him firmly. "Her name is Clara Hayes, 24. Waitress in Fairview. She has a younger sister, about 10. Parents are gone. I need every trace of where she came from." Marcus studied him carefully. "What are you expecting to find?" Adrian hesitated, staring out the glass wall at the fog creeping between the skyscrapers. "A connection," he admitted. "Something that explains why she knows things only my mother knew." Marcus nodded, sliding the notepad into his briefcase. "I'll be careful." When the investigator left, Adrian leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He hated himself for it, digging into Clara's life without her permission, but the stakes felt too high. If she was tied to his mother's past, if there was truth waiting in her history, he couldn't risk walking away. That afternoon, he drove back to the diner. It was becoming a routine. Slipping into the corner booth, pretending to be a man in need of a quiet cup of coffee, when, in truth, he was unraveling. Clara greeted him with polite detachment, the same clipped kindness she offered everyone else, but there was a subtle change. She no longer looked at him like an intrusion. Maybe it was because of Lily. Adrian had met her the day before, a sprightly girl with a messy braid and wide eyes who burst through the diner doors after school. Clara had scolded her gently for running, then tucked a sandwich into her hands. Lily had smiled at Adrian shyly, whispering, "My sister sings when she thinks no one hears." Adrian's chest had constricted at that. Today, Lily was there again, scribbling on math homework at the counter, while Clara worked the tables. Every so often, Adrian caught Clara glancing at her sister with protective tenderness. He admired it, envied it even. That fierce bond was something money couldn't buy. "Another coffee?" Clara asked, approaching his booth. "Thank you," Adrian said, his eyes flicking to the counter. "She's lucky to have you." Clara stiffened at the comment but softened a second later. "She's all I've got." "Hear all she's got." Clara didn't reply, only refilled his cup before walking away. But Adrian noticed how her hand trembled just slightly when she set the pot down. The hours stretched. Adrian lingered longer than usual, waiting for the crowd to thin. He told himself it was because he wanted quiet for his thoughts, but the truth was simpler. He couldn't seem to leave. Near closing, Clara hurried to the back to grab more napkins. Adrian, restless, rose from his booth and wandered to the counter where Lily had left her homework spread out. He picked up a pencil, smiling faintly at the doodles in the margins. Flowers, stars, and what looked like a stick-figure cat. Then his eyes caught on something else. Behind the counter, propped half-even near the register, was a framed photograph. Faded, old, edges chipped. Adrian froze. It showed Clara as a toddler, no more than 3, perched on the lap of a woman with long dark hair and eyes that pierced through the glass with startling familiarity. Adrian's hands shook as he reached forward. His pulse thundered. Those eyes. Those were his mother's eyes. Not just familiar. He almost dropped the frame as a wave of dizziness overtook him. He gripped the counter, struggling to breathe. The photo wasn't of his mother, but of someone close. Someone with the same gaze, the same softness. And then the memory slammed into him. A funeral, the weight of black cloaks, the smell of lilies. He had been only 12, standing beside his mother's casket. A woman had held him then, whispering comfort. A friend of his mother's, they told him. A sister in spirit. And then she was gone. He never saw her again. Adrian staggered back, colliding with the stool behind him. "Are you okay?" Clara's voice snapped him back. She was standing in the doorway with a stack of napkins in her arms, looking at him with narrowed suspicion. Adrian quickly set the frame back, his hand trembling. Yes, sorry. I thought I recognized." Clara crossed the room swiftly, her eyes landing on the photo. She lifted it gently, dusting the glass with her sleeve before setting it back more securely. Her voice softened. "That's my mom. She died when I was 15. Adrian swallowed hard, his throat dry. She looked familiar." Clara tilted her head, cautious now. "Most people say that. She had one of those faces." But Adrian knew better. He knew too well. That face wasn't just familiar. That face had been part of his world once, however briefly. As Clara returned to work, Adrian remained rooted to the floor, his mind spiraling. The lullaby, the line only his mother knew. The photograph of the woman who once held him in his grief. The pieces were colliding, forming a picture he wasn't ready to face. That night, Adrian's dreams dragged him back into the fragments of his childhood. He saw his mother sitting at the piano in their small house, her fingers gliding across keys while her voice wove the lullaby through the air. He saw himself curled against her, clutching her sleeve, begging her not to stop singing. And then, another memory forced its way forward. A woman standing beside his mother in the kitchen, laughing as they stirred soup. His mother calling her Rose. The name echoed like a bell in his skull. Rose. The same woman who had disappeared after the funeral. Could Clara's mother have been Rose? Adrian woke in a sweat, staring into the darkness of his bedroom. His chest ached with longing and fear. If it was true, if Clara was the daughter of Rose, then that meant, what? That Clara wasn't just some chance encounter? That fate had dragged him here to confront the echoes of his mother through another family's sorrow? The next day, he returned to the diner earlier than usual. Clara moved through the space with practiced grace, but Adrian noticed she was more guarded, more aware of his eyes following her. Perhaps she'd seen the recognition in him last night. When Lily bounded over to show her sister a spelling test with a gold star, Adrian leaned forward. "She's doing well in school." Clara smiled faintly, brushing Lily's hair back. "She's brilliant, smarter than me, honestly. I want her to have chances I never had." "You've done well by her," Adrian said softly. Clara glanced at him, her eyes worry. "Why do you keep coming back here, Mr. Cole? We don't usually get men in suits. Not unless they're lost." Abby's heart beat. He couldn't tell her everything, yet not without proof. Not without Marcus confirming what his heart already screamed. "Because it's quiet," he lied. "Because you make good coffee." Clara studied him for a long moment before returning to her tables. Later, when the crowd thinned, Adrian found himself drifting toward the counter again, his eyes inevitably drawn to the photograph. He stared at it until the world blurred, remembering the arms that once comforted him, the eyes that watched his mother with sisterly love. "Why are you staring at that picture?" Clara's voice came suddenly, sharper than before. Adrian turned, slowly. She stood behind him, arms folded, her apron streaked with flour. "I told you," she said firmly. "That's my mom. It's all I have left of her, so if you're going to keep looking at it like it's yours, at least tell me why." Adrian's lips parted, but no sound came. "Because she was mine," he wanted to say. "Because she held me once when I thought I'd drown in grief. Because your mother and my mother were bound by something I don't understand." But the words stuck. Instead, he whispered, "She reminds me of someone I lost." Clara's eyes softened slightly, though suspicion lingered. She nodded once, almost respectfully, then walked away. Adrian sat back down, trembling. When Marcus called him that evening, the investigator's voice carried the weight of confirmation. "You were right," Marcus said. "Her mother was Rose Hartman, sister by blood to your mother, Elena." Adrian's breath left his body. Clara wasn't just a stranger with a familiar song. She was his cousin. And suddenly, everything, the lullaby, the photograph, the undeniable bond, made terrible, perfect sense. Adrian Cole wasn't used to uncertainty. His world was built on precise numbers, contracts, and deals that were calculated down to the decimal. Yet every time he walked into the Fairview diner and saw Clara Hayes balancing plates and coffee mugs with quiet grace, he felt the ground shift beneath him. It wasn't just attraction. It was something deeper, something that tugged at his memory and left his nights. Photograph, those eyes, that song. He could no longer ignore the gnawing in his chest. The next evening, after the dinner rush had ended and only two older men lingered in the corner booth, Adrian rose from his usual seat and approached Clara at the counter. She was wiping it down, humming under her breath as always. But when she noticed his approach, her lips pressed together and she looked away. "Clara," Adrian said quietly. His voice was calm, not commanding, though every instinct told him to lead. "I need to ask you something. About your past?" She stiffened, her hand pausing mid-swipe. "Why?" "Because," he hesitated, then let the words tumble out. "Because the things you do, the song you sing, the photograph behind the counter, they connect to pieces of my own past, to my mother, and I can't keep pretending I don't notice." Clara's jaw tightened. She set the cloth down and turned to face him fully. "Mr. Cole," she said, her tone clipped. "I don't owe you my family's secrets. You're a customer, that's it." The finality in her voice stung more than he expected. Adrian stepped back slightly, but his gaze never wavered. "You're right, you don't owe me anything. But please, understand. I'm not asking out of idle curiosity. This is personal." Clara's eyes softened for a flicker of a second, but then she shook her head and walked away, vanishing into the kitchen. Adrian stood there, frustration coursing through him, the weight of unsaid truths pressing heavily. He wanted to push harder, but something about Clara's fierce protectiveness told him that if he forced her hand, she would shut him out forever. And yet, the questions only grew louder. By the following week, the small town had begun to whisper. Adrian's sleek car parked outside the diner day after day didn't go unnoticed. Patrons murmured over pie and coffee. Why is the millionaire always here? What does he want with Clara Hayes? Some accused Clara of scheming for his fortune. Others suggested Adrian had finally found a distraction in the sleepy town. Clara felt the stares burn into her back. She pretended not to care, but when she returned home to Lily at night, she found herself weeping quietly, afraid that her sister would someday hear the cruel words. Adrian noticed the change in her. Her smiles, rare as they were, vanished entirely. Her shoulders hunched more than before. Every time their eyes met, she looked away, faster, as though shielding herself from both him and the world. The gossip tightened around him too. Adrian's board members called him to question why he was burying himself in some countryside diner instead of focusing on the international hotel expansion. He gave curt answers, dismissing their concerns, but at night, in his empty penthouse, he knew they weren't wrong. He was distracted. Not just distracted, consumed. One evening, exhausted by the weight of it all, Adrian retreated to his study, a room he rarely entered since his mother's death. Dust covered the shelves, but his eyes fell to the old leather trunk beneath the window seat. He opened it, his hands trembling, and pulled out a stack of journals bound in faded blue covers, his mother's handwriting scrawled across the pages. Hours slipped by as he read entry after entry, memories rising like ghosts. Her words painted a portrait of a woman who had loved fiercely, feared deeply, and carried secrets he had never known. Then, in one journal, near the end, he froze at a passage. Rose made me promise, if I could not be there, I would protect her child as if my own. I pray that day never comes, but I feel it close. A lullaby is the only gift I can give, passed between us, meant to soothe a child who might one day need to remember they were loved. Adrian's breath caught, his heart hammered. Rose, Clara's mother. The lullaby. The promise. He dropped the journal to the floor, his hands shaking. Could it be? Had his mother left him this trail, this thread to follow? Did she know Clara might one day need him, or that he might need her? The next day, Adrian returned to the diner, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness, but lit with a determination he couldn't shake. Clara avoided him as usual, darting between tables, filling coffee cups, never lingering near his booth. But as the crowd thinned, he rose and approached her again, his voice firm but gentle. "Clara, please," he said, leaning against the counter. "I found something. In my mother's journals, she wrote about a promise. To protect another's child. A lullaby as a gift between them. Clara, I think she was writing about you." Clara froze, her hand gripping the coffee pot tightly. Slowly, she set it down, her shoulders trembling. For a long moment, silence filled the diner. Finally, she whispered, "The lullaby?" Adrian leaned closer. "What about it?" Clara swallowed, her eyes glossy with restrained tears. "It wasn't mine, it was my grandmother's. She said it came from a dear friend long ago, a friend who gave it as a gift to be carried forward." The world seemed to tilt beneath Adrian's feet. It was her, it had to be. And yet, Clara turned away, her walls rising again. "But that doesn't mean anything, Mr. Cole. Songs travel, stories change. Don't make this more than it is." Adrian wanted to argue, to shout that it was more, that the threads between them were too many to be coincidence. But as he looked at Clara's trembling hands, he realized she was terrified of him, of the truth, of what it could mean. So he said nothing. Not yet? The following days stretched into a battle Adrian could not control. His business demanded him in the city, calls, contracts piling up, but his heart kept dragging him back to that small-town diner where Clara sang songs that belonged to ghosts. Every visit felt heavier, the townspeople whispered louder, the board grew impatient, and Clara became more guarded, as though each day tightened the lock around her secrets. Adrian spent nights rereading his mother's journals, hoping for more clues, more evidence that he wasn't imagining the connection. But all he had were fragments, the promise to Rose, the grief that had swallowed them both. He knew Marcus was still digging, but impatience gnawed at him. He needed Clara to tell him, to admit what she knew. One evening, after Lily had fallen asleep in a booth with her schoolbooks scattered, Adrian caught Clara in the kitchen, rinsing dishes. "She can keep pushing me away," he said softly, "but it won't change the truth. The song, the photograph, your grandmother's words, they all point to the same place. Our families were bound, Clara. My mother promised to protect yours." "I think she meant you." Clara's hands froze under the stream of water. Slowly, she turned, her face pale. "You don't understand," she whispered. "My family lived in shadows. My mom never spoke about her past. My grandmother was the only one who told stories, and even those sounded like fairy tales. I don't know what you're hoping to find in me, but I can't give it." The Indian stepped closer, his eyes burning with sincerity. "I'm not hoping to find anything in you. I'm hoping to find the pieces of her I lost, and maybe the pieces of me too." For the first time, Clara didn't look away. Her eyes locked with his, trembling, uncertain. But before she could respond, the bell over the diner door jingled, and a pair of locals stepped in, calling for coffee. Clara turned back to the sink, her walls snapping up again. Adrian left that night more determined than ever. The town gossip, however, had reached a fever pitch. Articles appeared in the local paper about the millionaire haunting a waitress's diner. Online threads speculated romance, scandal, and betrayal. Clara bore the brunt of it, enduring whispers and stares. But Adrian knew his presence had painted a target on her. And yet, even as the world pressed against them, Adrian couldn't let go. The truth was too close now, hanging just beyond reach. One late evening, as the diner lights dimmed and Lily tugged sleepily at Clara's apron, Adrian lingered by the counter. He pulled something from his coat pocket, the faded journal page he had copied from his mother's writing. He slid it across the counter. "Read it," he urged quietly. Clara's hands shook as she picked it up. Her eyes scanned the page, and when she reached the words, "A lullaby passed as a promise for another's child," she gasped softly. Her lips trembled. She set the page down, her breath ragged. "Grandmother," she whispered. "She used to say the song wasn't ours. She said it was entrusted to us, a gift. I never understood why, until now." Her eyes lifted to his, shimmering with unshed tears. Adrian's throat ached. He wanted to reach across the counter, to take her hand, to say that they had finally found what tied them together. But Clara shook her head, retreating into herself. "Justn't change anything," she said firmly, though her voice cracked. "It's just a song. Just a story." And with that, she turned away, leaving Adrian staring at the page, his chest heavy with truths half spoken, half given. But he knew. And deep down, so did she. Adrian Cole had always prided himself on his ability to solve puzzles. Hotels, markets, expansions, every challenge had an answer if you had the right information and the will to pursue it. But this was different. The puzzle before him wasn't one of profits or properties. It was one of bloodlines, secrets, and a haunting lullaby that carried too much weight to be coincident. His mother's journals had cracked open doors he never knew existed. Promises, hidden ties, references to another child she had sworn to protect. It was enough to shake his core. But to get to the heart of it, Adrian knew there was only one place left to turn: his father's lawyer. The man was old, sharp-eyed, and loyal to a fault. For decades, he had handled the affairs of the Cole family, keeping skeletons buried and whispers locked away. Adrian arranged a meeting in his office, a place filled with mahogany bookshelves and the scent of leather-bound files. The lawyer greeted him with a polite bow of the head. "Mr. Cole, I assume this is not about business." Adrian said, lowering himself into the chair opposite the desk. His voice was clipped, his jaw tight. "This is about my mother. About what she was doing in the years before she died. I want the truth." The lawyer hesitated, his fingers tapping against the desk. "Your father would not approve of this line of inquiry." Adrian leaned forward, his eyes burning. "My father hasn't approved of a single choice I've made since I was a teenager. This isn't about him, it's about her. I've read her journals. I know she made promises. I know she gave more of herself than anyone realized. And I know you know the details. So stop protecting ghosts and start talking." The older man's resolve faltered under Adrian's unrelenting stare. Finally, he sighed and opened a locked drawer, pulling out a thin folder. He slid it across the desk. "Our records your mother insisted be kept off the books. She diverted funds, quietly, carefully, every month. Not to charities, not to distant projects, to a family." Adrian opened the folder. His pulse quickened as he scanned the documents. Bank transfers, notes in her handwriting, mentions of Rose Hayes. His chest constricted. Clara's mother. "She supported them," the lawyer continued. "Your mother believed in responsibility beyond her own home. She said that family had been wronged, left behind by the man she trusted least. She wouldn't tell me more, only that she owed it to them, and that if anything ever happened to her, those children were to be protected." Adrian's breath caught. Pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. Clara wasn't just connected by chance. She was connected by his mother's deliberate choice, by love, by loyalty, by sacrifice. "Father knew nothing of this?" Adrian asked. The lawyer shook his head. "On the contrary, he suspected. He asked me once if your mother was wasting money on fantasies. I told him nothing. She feared his reaction, Mr. Cole. She feared he would destroy what little safety that family had." Adrian stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. The weight of betrayal and revelation swirled together in his chest. His father had been cruel, controlling, dismissive, but to think he might have hidden truths this monumental, it left Adrian seething. Clara wasn't just a waitress singing a lullaby. She was a living embodiment of his mother's unfulfilled promises. And now she was slipping through his fingers. That evening, Aubrey returned to the diner, but Clara wasn't there. Lily explained softly that her sister had taken extra shifts elsewhere, trying to gather money. Rumors had begun swirling in town, and Clara wanted to leave before they swallowed her whole. Panic lanced through Adrian. He drove through the rain-slipped streets until he found her small rented apartment, its single lamp glowing faintly through the thin curtains. He didn't knock. He simply stood there in the hallway until the door opened and Clara froze in surprise. "Adrian, who?" she whispered, her voice weary. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," he shot back, rain dripping from his coat. "Running away?" Again. Clara's lips trembled. "You don't understand. People are talking, the gossip won't stop. They think I'm trying to trap you, use you. Lily hears the whispers when she goes to school. I won't let her live in this shadow." Adrian stepped inside, closing the door behind her. His voice softened, though the urgency remained. "Clara, I found records. Proof that my mother was supporting your family. She chose you. She tied herself to you long before I ever walked into that diner. This connection, it's real. It's not gossip. It's not scandal. It's..." Clara shook her head, tears slipping free. "But what does that mean for us? That I'm some charity case? That your mother pitied us and you feel bound by her ghost? I can't live with that, Adrian. I won't." He closed the distance between them, his eyes locked on hers. "Don't you see? This isn't pity. This is destiny. She wanted me to find you. She wanted me to see the strength in you, the grace in you, and now that I have, I can't let you go." Her resolve wavered, her shoulders trembling under the weight of his words, but she still whispered, brokenly, "I don't belong in your world." Adrian cupped her face gently, his voice fierce. "You belong, more than anyone I've ever known, because my world is empty without you." Clara turned her face away, struggling to breathe. The weight of everything, her family's secrets, his mother's generosity, the town's endless gossip, pressed down on her like a storm she couldn't outrun. "You don't know what it's like," she whispered, "to always be the one on the outside, to be looked at like you're less. My mother worked herself to death just to keep us afloat. My grandmother whispered songs because they were all she had left, and me, I've scrubbed tables and poured coffee for years just to keep Lily safe. That's not the life of someone who belongs in marble halls and penthouses." Adrian's heart twisted. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. "Clara," she interrupted, her voice trembling but firm. "If I stay near you, they'll never stop tearing me apart. They'll never stop tearing Lily apart. And I can't put her through that. I won't." Silence filled the small apartment, broken only by the sound of the rain beating against the windows. Adrian's chest rose and fell with sharp breaths as he fought to hold his temper. He wanted to argue, to demand she stopped running, but he remembered the girl in the diner, standing tall despite exhaustion, shielding her sister with every ounce of strength she had left. Instead, he forced his voice steady. "Do you think I haven't felt that same isolation? I grew up in marble halls, yes, but I was just as alone as you. My father's coldness was a prison. My mother's warmth was the only light, and when she was gone, I was left with nothing but shadows. Until you. Clara, don't you see? You and Lily are not my burden. You're my salvation." Her breath caught, her defenses faltering. Tears welled in her eyes, though she fought to hide them. "Why do you make it sound so easy?" she whispered. "Because love is simple," Adrian said, his voice breaking with raw honesty. "It's the world that makes it complicated." Clara closed her eyes, tears spilling freely now. She turned away, clutching the edge of the counter for support. "I don't know if I can trust this," she admitted. "I don't know if I can trust you." Adrian stepped closer, his hand hovering just above her shoulder. "Then trust her," he said softly. "Trust my mother. She believed in you. She chose you. She gave you her song because she knew one day it would lead us back together." Clara's sob broke the silence. She turned and buried her face in his chest, trembling as years of fear and doubt poured out of her. Adrian held her tightly, his arms a shield against the storm raging both outside and within. "I'm so tired," she whispered into his shirt. "Really, I know," he murmured, pressing his lips to the top of her head. "But you don't have to carry it alone anymore. Let me share it. Let me carry it with you." Words settled between them, a fragile truce in a world still eager to tear them apart. But for the first time, Clara allowed herself to lean into him, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't unworthy of his world. That night, as Adrian left her apartment, the rain finally began to ease. The streets glistened under the lamplight, and for the first time in years, Adrian felt as though he wasn't walking away from shadows, but toward something real. Something his mother had wanted all along. The air inside the bank was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that seemed to carry weight. Adrian Cole sat in the private room of the vault, his hands folded, his breath uneven. Before him lay a safety deposit box, pulled from the wall after endless signatures and proof of identity. He hadn't known it existed until the lawyer hinted, softly, almost guiltily, that there was something left by his mother which even his father had never dared to open. The box clicked open with a metallic snap. Inside lay a single envelope, yellowed at the edges, tied with a pale ribbon that had clearly once been white. His name was written across it in his mother's hand. Adrian's heart clenched. He hadn't seen her handwriting in decades, but the delicate loops of her letters were as familiar as the memory of her voice. With shaking fingers, he broke the seal and unfolded the paper. "My dearest Adrian," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have grown into the man I always believed you would become. There are things I could never tell you in life, truths I feared your father's pride would bury forever, but I promised myself that one day you would know them." His eyes blurred as he read on. She wrote of her friendship with Rose Hayes, Clara's grandmother, and of the bond they shared as young women. Rose had been left destitute after betrayal and hardship, but Adrian's mother had quietly supported her. She had made a vow if anything happened to her, she would leave part of her inheritance for Rose's family, so they would never be forgotten or lost. "If you meet them one day, you will understand why I did this. Family is not always written in blood. Adrian, it is written in loyalty, in love, and in song. If Rose's descendants are near you, protect them as I would have, and if you ever hear our lullaby again, let it remind you not only of me, but of the love I carried beyond my own." The letter ended with a line that broke him. "You will never be alone, my son. My love lives in you, and in them." Adrian pressed the paper to his lips, eyes burning, throat tight. When he finally looked up, Clara sat across the table, her own face pale with shock. She had been silent the entire time, watching him read, too afraid to breathe. When he pushed the letter toward her, her trembling hands accepted it. Her eyes darted across the page, scanning the words, widening with every line. Her lips parted, but no sound came. By the time she reached the end, tears fell freely down her cheeks. "She knew us," Clara whispered. "All this time, my grandmother," she told me, "we were never truly alone, but she never said why. She always said someone once gave her hope when she thought she'd lost everything. She kept working, she kept fighting, because of a promise. And it was your mother." Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands. Adrian circled the table and knelt beside her, resting his hands on her arms. "Clara," he said softly, "this isn't coincidence. This is what she wanted. This is why I found you. Why your voice, her song, was the bridge between us. You didn't just sing her lullaby, you brought her back to me." Clara shook her head, her tears spilling. "No, Adrian, don't you see? This will only make things worse. They'll say I was tied to your family's money all along. They'll say I've been plotting, that I was waiting for you. I can already hear it. The whispers, the accusations." She wasn't wrong. By the time they left the bank, the world was already circling like vultures. The press had caught wind of his frequent visits to the diner, of his attention to the waitress with tired eyes and a little sister. Cameras flashed, tabloids ran headlines, whispering that Clara Hayes was a gold digger who had charmed a millionaire with a sad story. Within days, the story had ballooned. Business analysts sneered, questioning Adrian's judgment. Society's elite rolled their eyes at his naivety. Even some of his board members began murmuring behind his back, warning that scandal could tarnish the Cole name and the empire he had built. Clara read the headlines and felt sick. She pulled away, refusing his calls for days. She didn't want to face him, didn't want to see the disappointment in his eyes once the pressure grew too heavy. She had lived her life, shielding Lily from cruelty, from whispers of poverty and shame. She couldn't drag Adrian's empire down with her. But Adrian was not his father. At a press conference, when the questions finally became unbearable, Adrian stood tall in front of the cameras. His voice carried through the room, steady and commanding. "You want to know who Clara Hayes is? She is not a gold digger. She is not a scandal. She is the granddaughter of the woman my mother trusted most in this world. She is the one who reminded me of my mother's song, who gave me back a piece of her love I thought I had lost forever. You can print what you want about me, but you will not slander her." The reporters fell silent. For once, Adrian had not used numbers or business logic to fight. He had used his heart. That evening, Clara stood in the shadows of his office, watching him pace after dismissing his board. He was exhausted, but his eyes lit up the moment they landed on her. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. He crossed the room in 3 strides. "I had to, because the truth isn't shameful, Clara. It's ours, and I won't let anyone take it from us." Her tears fell again, but this time they were different. This time, they were tears of a heart slowly surrendering. The days that followed were both tender and turbulent. Adrian found himself at the center of scrutiny. Headlines debating whether he had lost his mind, shareholders questioning whether he was risking the company's reputation. Yet through it all, he remained unshaken. Clara, however, could not find the same courage. The storm of judgment cut her deeply. She would sit alone in her room, staring at her grandmother's locket, whispering to herself that she wasn't meant for this life, that she would never belong. Adrian found her one evening at the diner after she had closed, her hands trembling as she wiped the counters. "You don't have to keep doing this," he said softly. Her head snapped up, eyes flashing. "Yes, I do. Because this is who I am, Adrian. I'm not a society woman. I'm not someone who belongs in front of flashing cameras. I'm just a waitress trying to protect her sister. And maybe that's all I'll ever be." Adrian stepped closer, his voice fierce with emotion. "No, you are more than that. You are the reason I'm standing here right now, breathing differently, living differently. You are the echo of my mother's love, the proof that she never truly left me. You are the woman who brought me back to life." Her lips parted, but no words came. The sincerity in his voice, the rawness in his eyes, it tore down every wall she had built. Still, she whispered, what if I ruin you? What if being with me costs you everything you've worked for? Adrian shook his head slowly, his hand lifting to brush a strand of hair from her face. Clara, I've had wealth, power, recognition, and it was hollow, empty, without meaning. You think I care about a reputation built on lies and polished facades? No. What I care about is the truth, and the truth is that I love you. Scandal or no scandal, boardroom or no boardroom, I won't let you go. Her chest rose with a trembling breath. For the first time, she let herself believe it, that maybe she was not a burden, not an unworthy shadow. Maybe she was exactly where she was meant to be. She broke down in his arms, sobbing, as years of fear, shame, and exhaustion poured out. He held her through it, murmuring words of reassurance into her hair. The letter, now framed in his study, remained a constant reminder. His mother had trusted him to find Clara, to protect her, to see her not as a scandal, but as a legacy of love. And Adrian intended to honor that trust with everything he had. One night, under the soft glow of the city lights spilling through the diner's windows, Adrian took Clara's hand. His voice was low but steady. You didn't just sing my mother's song, he told her. You gave it back to me. You gave her back to me. And for that, I will never let you go. Clara's tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She nodded, unable to speak, her hand tightening in as if anchoring herself to the promise he offered. Their bond had been tested by secrets, by society, by wounds both old and new. But now it was stronger than either of them could have imagined, for in the midst of scandal and doubt, they had found what mattered most: love and the courage to hold on to it no matter the cost. And though Clara still feared the world's cruelty, one thing had changed. She was no longer alone in facing it. The night of the gala arrived draped in velvet and gold. Chandeliers glistened above the grand ballroom of Cole International's flagship hotel, casting pools of shimmering light over the polished marble floors. Outside, cameras flashed as limousines delivered society's elite politicians, philanthropists, actors, and executives, each one dressed in glittering gowns or tailored tuxedos. The event promised an evening of charity, elegance, and prestige. But for Adrian Cole, it was meant to be more than that. In the quiet of his penthouse suite above the ballroom, Adrian adjusted his bow tie before a mirror. His reflection showed a man every guest below would recognize, confident, wealthy, composed. Yet beneath the layers of satin and silk, his heart raced with a vulnerability he hadn't felt in years. Tonight was not about business. Tonight was about Clara. He turned when he heard a soft knock. Clara stepped inside, her younger sister Lily at her side. For a moment, Adrian forgot how to breathe. Clara wore a modest gown in soft blue, its simple fabric chosen carefully so as not to draw attention, yet on her it radiated a quiet beauty. Lily, dressed in a pale yellow dress Clara had painstakingly altered by hand, clutched her sister's hand tightly, eyes wide at the opulence surrounding them. You both look incredible, Adrian said, his voice catching as he crossed the room. Clara gave a nervous smile. This still feels wrong, Adrian. We don't belong in a place like this. You belong, more than anyone, he said firmly. You belong, because you remind me of what truly matters, and tonight, I want the world to see that. Her brow furrowed with uncertainty, but she nodded. She trusted him, even if the thought of stepping into that ballroom made her stomach twist. 10 minutes later, the grand entrance doors opened, and Adrian led Clara and Lily into the sea of glittering lights and murmured conversation. The crowd turned, whispers spreading like ripples through water. That's Adrian Cole. And who's that with him? A waitress, heads tilted, fans fluttered. Clara held her chin high, though her hands trembled at her sides. Adrian's presence anchored her. He never let go of her hand, not even when they reached the center of the ballroom, where the host welcomed him with applause. He gave a brief speech about the importance of legacy, of honoring those who came before, but his voice carried something it rarely did in boardroom. Tonight, Adrian said, his gaze sweeping across the glittering sea of faces, I want to share something personal, a memory, a song. He turned then, his eyes seeking Clara's. She stiffened, her breath caught in her throat. Clara Hayes, he said softly, yet firmly enough for the microphone to carry his words. Would you sing for us? The room erupted into gasps and murmurs. Clara's face went pale, her knees weakened beneath her. "Adrian, no," she whispered under her breath, her fingers clutching his sleeve desperately. I can't." "You can," he said, his voice steady, his eyes holding hers with quiet determination. "Because this isn't about them. It's about us. About her." She knew he meant his mother. The lullaby, the thread that tied them together when everything else seemed impossible. Slowly, with the weight of the world pressing against her chest, Clara stepped toward the stage. The lights felt blinding, the stairs unbearable. But then she caught Lily's eyes, the reporter, and heard. The microphone hummed softly as she lifted it. Silence fell over the ballroom. For a moment, she stood frozen, her heart hammering, her palms damp. Then, from somewhere deep inside her, the melody rose. Her voice, though unsteady at first, carried the lullaby's familiar tune, soft, aching, and hauntingly beautiful. Each note trembled through the air like fragile glass, yet it rang with sincerity, with love, with memory. Adrian stood still as stone, his throat tight, his chest heaving. The sound pierced him, unraveling the carefully woven fabric of his composure. It was as though his mother's spirit filled the room, her love wrapping around him once more. His eyes blurred with tears. He didn't care if the world saw. Clara sang the final verse, the one his mother had always whispered just before sleep. By the time the last note faded, the ballroom was drenched in silence. Not a fork clinked, not a cough interrupted. The audience was spellbound. Some dabbed the adjoys discreetly, others stared in awe at the young woman who had just poured her soul into the air. Clara lowered the microphone, her hands trembling violently. For a heartbeat, she feared humiliation. But then the applause began, soft at first, then rising into a thunderous standing ovation. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her tears glistening under the lights. She looked out into the crowd and found Adrian's eyes. He wasn't clapping, he wasn't moving. He was simply staring at her, as though she were the only person in the world. When she descended the stage, he met her halfway, pulling her into the circle of his presence, shielding her from the blinding stares. He took the microphone, his voice low but steady. "You ask who Clara Hayes is," he said to the audience, his hand never leaving hers. "She is not just a waitress. She is the woman who gave me back my mother's memory. She is the reason I remembered love when I thought I had lost it forever. And tonight, I want you all to know, she is also the woman who holds." Gasps swept the room again, followed by murmurs. But Adrian didn't falter. His declaration was raw, unapologetic, and final. Clara's tears spilled freely, her chest tightening with emotions too vast to name. Her hand pressed against her lips as she shook her head in disbelief. Adrian turned to her then, lowering the microphone. His voice was just for her. "Clara, will you stay in my life? Will you let me give you the love you've given back to me?" Her answer came in a whisper, but it was louder than any applause. "Yes." And in that instant, surrounded by chandeliers and whispers, by applause and tears, Adrian Cole and Clara Hayes carved their own promise into the night. The applause lingered long after the words left her lips. For the first time in her life, Clara felt seen, not as the girl waiting tables, not as the sister scraping by for survival, but as a woman whose voice could move hearts, whose presence could heal wounds. The ballroom might have been filled with the wealthiest people in the city, but in that moment, she was richer than all of them combined. Adrian kept her close, shielding her from the flood of curious questions as guests approached. "She's incredible," one whispered. "Where did she come from?" asked another. Adrian gave no explanation beyond what he had already declared. His arm around Clara was answer enough. Later, when the crowd began to disperse into laughter and clinking glasses, Clara stood quietly on the balcony overlooking the city lights. The night air cooled her flushed cheeks. She pressed a hand to her chest, replaying the moment over and over, the hush of the crowd, the sound of her own voice trembling into the silence, Adrian's unwavering gaze. Adrian found her there, stepping into the soft glow of the balcony lights. He slipped his jacket around her shoulders. "You were extraordinary," he said gently. She let out a shaky laugh. "I thought I was going to faint." "You didn't. You stood there and gave them a piece of your soul. Do you know how rare that is?" Her eyes softened as she looked at him. "Do you know what you did, Adrian? You didn't just put me on a stage. You gave me back my courage. You believed in me when I couldn't." For a long moment, neither spoke. The sounds of the gala drifted faintly from inside, the clinking of glasses, the swell of a string quartet, but out here, the night belonged to them. Finally, Clara whispered, "I still don't know if I belong in your world." Adrian turned fully toward her, his hands resting gently on her arms. "Clara, this isn't about belonging in my world. It's about building a new one together. Not defined by money or status or power. Defined by love. Defined by the lullaby that brought us together. Defined by us." Her lips trembled and she nodded slowly, tears threatening again. The balcony doors opened then, and Lily came rushing out, her eyes sparkling. "Clara, you were amazing. Everyone was watching and you sang like an angel." She flung herself into Clara's arms, giggling. Adrian smiled, ruffling Lily's hair. "Your sister is braver than she knows," Adrian said warmly. Lily looked up at him with wide eyes. "Does that mean she's going to stay with you forever?" The innocence of the question made Clara laugh through her tears. She kissed her sister's forehead. "It means we're not going anywhere, Lily." Adrian's hand found hers again, strong and steady. "No," he agreed softly. "You're home now, both of you." Inside, the gala continued. But for Adrian, Clara, and Lily, the night had already ended with something far more precious than applause. A promise of love, of belonging, of a future carved not from marble and chandeliers, but from lullabies and truth. The year passed like a gentle unfolding, each day stitching itself into the fabric of a life Adrian Cole never imagined he would have. Once his days were consumed by business meetings, boardroom debates, and cold hotel suites echoing with silence. Now, the air of his mansion vibrated with warmth, laughter, and the delicate thread of music that seemed to follow Clara wherever she went. The transformation began with their wedding. It wasn't the grand spectacle the tabloids expected, nor the glittering affair society thought a millionaire hotel tycoon should throw. Adrian insisted it remained small, intimate, filled only with the people who mattered, close friends, his most loyal staff, and Clara's little sister Lily, who skipped down the aisle in a yellow dress with a bouquet of daisies. Clara's gown was simple, a flowing white fabric her own hands had helped to alter. But when Adrian saw her walking toward him, her eyes shimmering with tears, he realized no jewel in the world could ever rival her radiance. When they exchanged vows, Adrian's voice broke as he whispered the words, "Clara, you gave me back my mother's lullaby, but more than that, you gave me back myself." Clara's tears spilled freely, her hand clutching his as though anchoring them both. And when they kissed, Lily cheered louder than anyone else, clapping her hands until the guests laughed. Married life unfolded in quiet, precious moments. Clara moved into Adrian's mansion, but it no longer felt like the museum of marble and shadows it once had. She filled it with life. She painted Lily's room in cheerful colors, lined the hallways with fresh flowers, and opened the kitchen windows while she sang softly as she cooked. Adrian would find himself pausing on the staircase, simply listening to her voice threading through the air like sunlight through glass. Lily thrived too. With Adrian's support as her legal guardian, she enrolled in a private school where she quickly caught up with her peers. At night, she would return home with stories spilling out of her mouth, her laughter echoing through the once hollow mansion halls. Adrian, who had lived most of his life surrounded by silence, felt something inside him heal every time her laughter filled the room. But perhaps the greatest transformation was Adrian himself. He was no longer the distant hotel magnate, driven by profit and haunted by loss. Clara had coaxed him into rediscovering joy in simple things. He began to cook breakfasts her on Sunday mornings, flipping pancakes that sometimes landed on the floor to Lily's delight. He found peace in evening walks through the garden, his hand entwined with Clara's as they watched the sunset paint the sea. And most of all, he found purpose beyond wealth. Inspired by Clara's lullaby, the song that bridged the past and present, Adrian established the Isabel Cole Foundation for Music and Literacy, named after his mother. The foundation funded after-school programs, community centers, and scholarships for children who dreamed of music but lacked the means. Clara often volunteered there, teaching simple songs to wide-eyed children, while Adrian stood at the back, his chest tight with one. He knew his mother would have approved. Through Clara, he honored her legacy, not with marble monuments, but with laughter, voices, and music. Still, the most sacred moments remained private. On quiet evenings, after the world's demands faded, Clara would sit by the window with Adrian, her voice humming the lullaby that had changed everything. Sometimes Lily would curl up nearby, listening until her eyes grew heavy, falling asleep on the couch while Adrian and Clara whispered about dreams, fears, and the future. One evening in particular, as rain tapped softly against the glass, Clara hummed the final verse of the lullaby, and Adrian closed his eyes, leaning his head against her shoulder. "I used to think I'd lost her forever," he whispered, his voice raw with vulnerability. "But then you came, and through you, Clara, I found both her love and my own." Clara kissed his temple gently. "Your mother never left you, Adrian. She just waited until you were ready to hear her song again." And in that moment, he knew Clara was right. His mother's memory wasn't gone, it lived on, not only in the lullaby, but in the family he had found, the home he had built, and the love that would outlast any empire of hotels or wealth. The mansion, once a prison of grief, had become a sanctuary of love. And at the center of it all was Clara, the girl who sang a lullaby in a diner and unknowingly rewrote the story of his life. The following summer, the garden of the Cole estate bloomed in a riot of colors, its roses and lilies tended lovingly by Clara and Lily. Adrian often joined them, though his skill with gardening was comically poor. Clara would laugh as he misplanted bulbs upside down, while Lily teased that her big brother was hopeless with flowers. Adrian would only grin, happy to be ridiculed, happy simply to be part of this new family. The foundation thrived. Local newspapers carried stories of children learning to read through songs, of choirs formed in community centers, of a scholarship fund that sent promising young musicians to college. Whenever asked about his inspiration, Adrian never hesitated. "It was my wife," he would say. "She sang a song that healed me, and I wanted that healing to touch others." But the most powerful testament wasn't in the headlines, it was in the way Adrian lived. He no longer filled his calendar with endless meetings. Instead, he carved out afternoons to pick Lily up from school or evenings to sit with Clara in the garden. He had discovered that real wealth wasn't measured in balance sheets, but in shared laughter, in voices singing together, in the sound of a lullaby echoing at dusk. One evening, as twilight wrapped the estate in a gentle glow, Clara and Adrian walked hand in hand through the garden. Fireflies flickered among the hedges, and Lily's laughter drifted from the porch, where she played with her homework abandon. Clara began to hum the lullaby softly, her voice blending with the chorus of crickets and the rustle of leaves. Adrian stopped walking, turning to face her. The fading sunlight painted her features in gold, her hair catching the light like a halo. He drew her into his arms, pressing his forehead to hers. "Do you know what this song means to me now?" he whispered. Clara's smile was tender. "Tell me." "It used to be a reminder of loss," he said slowly, his eyes shimmering with emotion. "But now it's a promise, that even when life takes, love always finds a way back. I thought I lost her forever, but through you, I found her again. And I found you." Tears pooled in Clara's eyes, her lips trembling. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "And you gave me something too, Adrian. You gave me a place where I'm no longer just surviving. You gave me a home." They stood there in the garden as the night deepened, the lullaby fading gently into the stars above. For Adrian, the song no longer belonged only to his past, it belonged to their future. To Lily's laughter, to the foundation lifting children's voices, to the family that had risen from pain and loss into love and light. The world would always see him as Adrian Cole, the millionaire hotel magnate. But here, with Clara in his arms and Lily's laughter in the background, he was simply a man who had finally found what he had been searching for all his life. Not wealth, not success, but love woven into a song, carried in Clara's voice, alive in every moment they shared. And as the stars filled the sky, Adrian whispered once more, his words carried into the night air. "More than a song, Clara. You gave me everything." The story closed not with applause, nor with headlines, but with the simple sound of a lullaby drifting softly into the night sky, eternal and true.